There are a handful of artists that totally control the charts every year. In this video, we'll look at the artists that dominated each year, from 2010 to 2023. 2010. 2010 marked the dawn of a new era. After breaking through in 2009, Lady Gaga dominated the music industry in 2010, with infectious pop anthems like Bad Romance and Telephone dominating the airwaves. She released a reissue to her debut album, The Fame Monster, and both albums sold very well in the year. Katy Perry also dominated the Hot 100 with the release of the record-breaking Teenage Dream, scoring 3 #1 singles and spending a total of 12 weeks at the top in 2010. The rise of Justin Bieber captivated audiences with the release of his debut My World 2.0. Taylor Swift dropped Speak Now and sold 1 million copies just in her first week, while Eminem continued to reign supreme in hip-hop with the release of Recovery. 2011. 2011 was Adele's year. Her soulful vocals dominated the charts. Hits like Rolling in the Deep and Someone Like You resonated deeply with listeners worldwide, with her debut album 21 becoming the best-selling album of the year with 5.8 million units sold. It also became the best-selling album of the 2010s. Katy Perry continued her domination with hits like E.T. and Last Friday Night, keeping the party going by topping the Hot 100 in 2011. Rihanna also made an impact on the charts with 2 #1 songs on the Hot 100, with We Found Love ending the year spending 10 weeks on #1. LMFAO came out of nowhere with 2 #1 hits, and Party Rock Anthem spending 6 weeks on #1, with the video going viral on YouTube. Drake also emerged as a dominant force in hip-hop with the release of his classic album Take Care. 2012. 2012 was a transitional year as Adele continued setting records with 21, ending the year as the best-selling album with 5.2 million units sold in the US in the year. Taylor Swift also dropped the second biggest album of the year, Red, which sold 3.8 million units in 2012. It was her country pop crossover. We Are Never Getting Back Together was a chart-topper from the album, spending 3 weeks on #1. One Direction also took the world by storm with their debut album Up All Night, while Rihanna continued to redefine pop music with her popular album Unapologetic. 2012 also saw the rise of EDM, with artists like Calvin Harris and David Guetta impacting the charts. 2013. Macklemore and Ryan Lewis surprised everyone when they started the year with the #1 song Thrift Shop and the unexpected success of their album The Heist. Justin Timberlake dropped the biggest album of the year, The 2020 Experience, selling 3 million units in 2013 in the US. Bruno Mars ended the year as the biggest artist of 2013 according to Billboard, with his chart-topping album Unorthodox Jukebox, which has sold 2.3 million units by the end of the year. Imagine Dragons also made a splash on the charts with the release of their album Night Visions. Radioactive ended the year as the 3rd biggest song of 2013. Beyoncé popped up at the end of the year with a self-titled surprise album, which solidified her status as a global icon. 2014. 2014 was the year of One Direction, as the boy band ended the year as the biggest artists in the US, according to Billboard. They dropped Midnight Memories at the end of 2013, and followed it up with 4 at the end of 2014. Iggy Azalea had a breakout year, with Fancy spending 7 weeks on #1. Meghan Trainor also broke through with All About That Bass, which dominated the Hot 100 for 8 weeks. Taylor Swift also had a huge year, dropping 2 #1 singles, Shake It Off, which spent 4 weeks on #1, and Blank Space, which spent 7 weeks at the top. Her album 1989 debuted with huge figures, selling 1.2 million copies just in its first week. J. Cole also made an impact when he dropped 2014 Forest Hills Drive at the end of the year. 2015. 2015 was The Weeknd's year, when his dark and atmospheric R&B sound took center stage. He scored 2 #1 singles, Can't Feel My Face and The Hills. Adele came back with her album 25, which ended the year as the best-selling album worldwide, selling 8 million units in 2015. Taylor Swift continued her domination with 1989, selling huge in 2015 too, with 3.1 million units worldwide. Kendrick Lamar released his critically acclaimed album To Pimp a Butterfly, which is considered as one of the best albums of the decade. Justin Bieber had a good 2015, with the release of his comeback album Purpose at the end of the year. 2016. Drake continued his chart domination with the release of his most popular album, Views, which ended 2016 as the best-selling album, selling 4.1 million units in the US in the year. From the album, One Dance was the biggest, spending 10 weeks on number 1. Justin Bieber continued his success from the previous years, with his singles On Purpose, Love Yourself, and Sorry ending the year as the first and second biggest songs, according to Billboard. The Chainsmokers had their breakout year in 2016 with the release of their huge single Closer, which spent 12 weeks on number 1. Rihanna also had a great year with the release of her best album, Anti, which had the single Work, which spent 9 weeks on number 1. Beyoncé also made history, dropping her best visual album, Lemonade, which sold 2.1 million units in the US in 2016. 2017. Ed Sheeran dominated the year with the release of his album Divide, which had 2 number 1 singles in the year, with Shape of You spending 12 weeks on number 1 on the Hot 100. Kendrick Lamar dropped his most popular album Damn, which ended the year as the best-selling album in the US with 2.7 million units sold. Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee released the biggest song of the year, Despacito, which spent an astounding 16 weeks on number 1 on the Hot 100. Post Malone's genre-bending sound resonated with audiences this year, when his 2016 album Stoney sold 1.5 million units in the year, and his single Rockstar spent 8 weeks on number 1 on the Hot 100. At the end of the year, Taylor Swift released Reputation, which sold 1.2 million units just in its first week. 2018. Drake dominated the charts in 2018, with God's Plan spending 11 weeks on number 1, Nice for What spending 8 weeks on number 1, and In My Feelings spending 10 weeks on number 1. His album Scorpion sold 3.1 million units in 2018. Cardi B also had a huge year, with her debut album Invasion of Privacy selling 2 million units in the US. Ariana Grande started her dominant era, dropping Sweetener, and her single Thank You Next spending 8 weeks on number 1 on the Hot 100. Post Malone also continued his domination, with his album Beer Bongs and Bentleys selling 3.2 million units in 2018. Travis Scott also made an impact, dropping his most successful album Astroworld. 2019. Old Town Road put Lil Nas X on the map, becoming a viral sensation and breaking the record for the most weeks spent on the Hot 100, with 19 weeks. Billie Eilish also dominated the year, with her debut album selling 2.2 million units in the US just in 2019. She also scored a number 1 hit with Bad Guy, which spent a lot of weeks on number 2 before hitting the top spot. Ariana Grande continued her impressive run, dropping her successful album Thank You Next, which spawned the single 7 Rings, which spent 8 weeks on number 1 on the Hot 100. Post Malone continued his domination, dropping his album Hollywood's Bleeding and scoring 2 number 1 hits, Sunflower and Circles. Taylor Swift also made an impact in the year, with her album Lover selling 2 million units in the US. 2020. The impact of the pandemic on the music industry was significant, as it delayed and cancelled huge releases. Though it was a hard time, some artists thrive in the chaos. Dua Lipa had a huge year, releasing her 80s synth-pop album Future Nostalgia. It is now the 6th most streamed album of all time, with 11.8 billion streams on Spotify. The Weeknd ruled the year, releasing his album After Hours, with Blinding Lights topping the charts for 4 weeks and dominating the world. It is now the most streamed song of all time on Spotify, with more than 4 billion streams. Taylor Swift was in her folk era, dropping 2 albums, Folklore and Evermore, with Folklore becoming the 2nd biggest album of the year, selling 2.2 million units in 2020. Lil Baby dropped the best-selling album of the year, My Turn. BTS also brought K-pop to the mainstream, releasing 2 chart-topping singles. 2021. 2021 belonged to Olivia Rodrigo and her debut album Sour, which captured the Gen Z experience. The rise of TikTok as a music discovery platform contributed to her success, with her scoring 2 number 1 singles, Driver's License, which spent 8 weeks on number 1, and Good For You, which spent 1 week on number 1. Country made it to the mainstream, with Morgan Wallen's Dangerous the double album ending 2021 as the best-selling album in the US, selling 3.2 million units. Drake dropped the third biggest album of the year, Certified Lover Boy, selling 1.9 million units in 2021. BTS continued their success in the US, dropping 2 Hot 100 chart toppers. Doja Cat also made an impact, dropping the slow burner Planet Her. 2022. Harry Styles had a huge 2022, releasing his album Harry's House. As It Was ended the year as one of the biggest songs, spending an astounding 15 weeks on #1 on the Hot 100. Taylor Swift also had a huge year, dropping her 10th studio album Midnights, which debuted on #1, selling 1.5 million units just in its first week. The big single from the album Anti-Hero spent 8 weeks on #1. But the biggest album of 2022 was Un Verano Sin Ti by Bad Bunny, which ended the year selling 3.4 million units. It is now the most streamed album of all time, with 15.7 billion streams on Spotify. 2023. Miley Cyrus made her comeback in 2023, dropping her biggest single of the year, Flowers, which spent 8 weeks on #1. SZA also had a huge year after she dropped her album SOS at the end of 2022. It ended 2023 as the third best-selling album of the year. Morgan Wallen also continued its success with its album One Thing at a Time, which ended the year as the best-selling album in the US. But Taylor Swift absolutely dominated 2023 with her record-breaking Eras Tour and her 2 re-recorded albums, with Speak Now Taylor's version selling 1.7 million units, and 1989 Taylor's version selling 2.8 million units in the year. As a matter of fact, she had 5 of the 10 best-selling albums of 2023. 2024 is shaping up to be a great year. Who do you think will dominate by the end of the year?